He was one of the most feared figures in the streets of Philadelphia. He was incarcerated over 50 times according to Philadelphia police reports. He was an associate of Philadelphia's Godfather, Angelo Bruno, and is listed as one of the co-conspirators to have killed him. This is the story of Frank the Barracuda Sindone. In pop culture, Frank Sindone is famously for being seen briefly depicted in Martin Scorsese's 2019 film The Irishman. The actor Joseph Bono portrays Frank Sindone, who shakes the hand of the titular character played by Robert DeNiro. He is seen for about 10 seconds into the movie. However, Frank Sindone will play a major role in the Philadelphia crime family. In the streets of Philadelphia, he will be called Barricuda Frank. In the news and in law enforcement, he will be labeled Frank the Barracuda Sindone. The moniker of the Barracuda will follow him due to his loan sharking operations, and he would catch his prey to anyone who owed him money. Frank Gaetano Sindone was born on December 30, 1927 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was born to Sicilian parents, Giuseppe Sindone and Domenica Minnie Sindone. Giuseppe Sindone was 37 and his mother, Domenica Minnie Giordano, was 28 when Frank Sindone was born. His parents would have 7 children. He would be the first male born and the middle child of the family, which means he was the 4th of 7. There are not many reports of Frank Sindone's upbringing since this was during the period of limited news coverage and when mob figures did not want to be seen in the headlines. Frank Sindone's mother and father shared the same birthday, February 23rd. His father, Giuseppe, was born on February 23rd, 1890 in Sicily, Italy. His mother, Domenica Minnie Giordano, was born on February 23rd, 1899 in Sicily. Therefore, Giuseppe was 9 years older than Minnie. Frank Sindone was born during the Great Depression years and when the mafia was growing massively due to the Prohibition era. In 1939, World War II began. At the age of 17, Frank was reported to have been drafted into the military. Giuseppe Sindone died on December 18, 1946. Frank Sindone was 18 years old when his father died, and it would be less than 2 weeks shy of his 19th birthday. His mother, Minnie, died on April 2, 1955 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Frank Sindone was 27 at the time. Frank Sindone will later grow to be a made man in La Cosa Nostra, meaning this thing of ours. He stood approximately between 5 foot 10 inches to 6 feet tall. He was known for his trademark black glasses, clean-shaved face, and oval-shaped head. He would be seen taking pictures with other mobsters. For example, here is a surveillance photo of Antonio Tony Bananas Capernegro, Ralph Blackie Napoli, and Frank Sindone himself. Another photo here is at a restaurant. From left to right is Joseph Ciancaglini, John Stanford, Frank Sindone, Johnny Keys Simone, and the Godfather Angelo Bruno. He would be a mafia loan shark extraordinaire who controlled a very large gambling and loan sharking operations in the Philadelphia criminal underworld. He would be a businessman owning a few stores. Here is the footage of his home at the time of his life and death. Here is what Frank Sindone's house looks like today at 1811 Schley Street. Here is the Frank Sindone's other business, Frank Cabana Steak on 10th and Moyamensing Street at the time. And here is Frank Sindone's business of what it is today. It is called Stadium and Pizza Grill. March 21st, 1980. At around 10:30 p.m., Angelo Bruno was sitting in front of the passenger seat of his Chevy Caprice being driven by a young Sicilian-born mob associate named John Stanfa. Bruno's normal driver, his trusted aide Raymond Long John Mortorano, had conspicuously made himself unavailable at a short time earlier when it's time to drive the Don home from a dinner meeting with his subordinates at a popular South Philadelphia restaurant named Coos's Little Italy, which was owned by one of Bruno's capos, Frank Sindone, and he had previously been at the site of Piccolo's 500 Club, which had been owned by Nicky Scarfo's uncles, the Piccolo brothers. Over the last few months, Sindone was known as the Barracuda, had become close with Antonio Tony Bananas Capernegro. Sindone, who ran very large gambling loan shark operations in South Philadelphia, seemed to share Capernegro's belief that Bruno was no longer the best fit to run the family. Bruno was not aware of any of this, as he accepted a kiss on the cheek from Sindone as he was leaving Coos's Little Italy that night. Some underworld observers believe that Sindone had purposely marked Bruno with the kiss of death. Hours later, Angelo Bruno was shot to death in front of his home. The gangland-style killing became an iconic mob hit picture. Bruno's mouth had gaped impossibly wide like a scream death. Angelo Bruno's death would lead to a crowd filled with press members and a community curious over the gruesome death. Here is the news footage of law enforcement speaking to Sindone after his killing.
Sergeant Walt Coghlan was sent from the crime scene back to Cuz's restaurant to interview some of Bruno's men.
Sindone was sitting by himself when we walked in to talk to him. And I said, "Frank, what happened?" And he went, "Don't know." I said, "Oh, yeah, I didn't say." We said a few other things that you can't put on television. He said, "I don't know why anybody would want to kill that man. He was a saint." I said, "Well, he is now, if he wasn't before."
Philip Chickenman Testa would be Bruno's successor. He, along with Scarfo and other members, would pay tribute to Bruno's memory in a toast, while Scarfo, Philip Leonetti, the Testa family, and the Molino brothers were busy toasting the past, present, and future as Scanicchios. Antonio Capernegro and his crew were toasting to a very different future. At Capernegro's club in Newark, the 311 Club, the toast saw Tony Bananas as the new Don and the Barracuda, Frank Sindone, as his underboss. When the Genovese Death Squad reported back to Vincent the Chin Gigante, Bobby Louis Manna, and others that Capernegro and Solano were dead in the plot of Angelo Bruno being killed, one of them mentioned that they believed they saw Nicky Scarfo sitting at the bar around the corner with another guy they didn't recognize. Bobby Manna immediately ordered the men to go back to the bar and bring the two men to the Genovese clubhouse, as he knew that his men were mistaken. The man at the bar was not Nicky Scarfo, it was John Stanfa, the young Sicilian-born mob associate who driven Angelo Bruno home on the night that he was killed, and the man that he was with was longtime Bruno mob captain Frank the Barracuda Sindone. When the men returned to the bar moments later, Stanfa and Sindone were gone. According to George Anastasia's Blood and Honor book, Nick the Crow Caramonti said he was very close with Frank Sindone. He used to go by the 11th and Christian Street a lot, where Sindone had a restaurant with Tommy Del Giorno. This will be Coos's Little Restaurant, the last restaurant Angelo Bruno attended the night that he was killed. At the time, Tommy Del Giorno wasn't a soldier, but Sindone was. And I would hear remarks he would pass about Angelo Bruno like, "This guy wants the money all for himself," according to Nick the Crow Caramonti, referring to Sindone. Sindone, a longtime Bruno family soldier, was one of the biggest loan sharks in Philadelphia. It was to be the underboss of Capernegro's rebel regime. He was a real Barracuda, Caramonti says of Sindone. You couldn't trust him at all. Philadelphia police were also watching John Stanfa, the driver of a car in which Bruno was killed, was visited at the hospital by Frank Sindone and Johnny King Simone. Stanfa, a Sicilian immigrant who owned a small construction business in Philadelphia, had sustained minor injuries from flying glass and shotgun pellets. A police officer who spoke Italian had been posted at the door of Stanfa's hospital room. When Sindone and Simone visited Stanfa in the hospital, they huddled conspiratorially around his bed, speaking in whispers in Sicilian dialect that the police officer couldn't understand. Stanfa released from the hospital 2 days later after the shooting. 4 days later, he was spotted getting into a car with Sindone and Simone in Philadelphia. They were trailed by the FBI to Newark, where they met with Capernegro. Nick the Crow Caramonte claimed that he was a good man, and he said that he was innocent of the Barracuda's tricks. The Barracuda was Frank Sindone. See, Sindone was power crazy. For years, he hated Chicky Narducci, hated Nicky Scarfo, so Capernegro and Sindone had their own hit lists, according to Nick the Crow Caramonte. This Capernegro was vicious. They were going to take out Nicky, Frank, Narducci, such hatred. I think Scarfo and Testa ended up using Chicky Ciancaglini to set up Sindone. That's how they would get him. Frank Sindone was there when Philip Leonetti and the others were being made. Little did he know the new recruited soldiers like Salvatore Chucky Merlino and Salvatore Salvi Testa will play a role in his demise. But within weeks of the not guilty verdict of Vincent Falcone's murder, little Nicky Scarfo was back to his murderous ways. Sindone was one of the guys was involved in the plot to kill Ange. According to Mafia Prince, Philip Leonetti stated, "My uncle told Phil Testa that Sindone was a snake and that he couldn't be trusted." Phil Testa agreed, so he set him up. Philip Chicken Man Testa requested to borrow $50,000 from Sindone. Testa knew this maneuver in the mob in which he, as the borrower, knows the lender, Frank Sindone, will be killed, and therefore the borrower would never worry about paying the debt. This maneuver will haunt Philip Testa in the future, as Frank Chicky Narducci would use this maneuver against him when Philip Testa becomes the boss of the Philadelphia crime family. Neither man saw this coming. And Salvi took him to a house in South Philadelphia where Frank Monte was waiting inside to see him. When Sindone was shaking hands with Frank Monte, Chucky Merlino shot him in the back of the head and killed him. Chucky hit him 3 times in the back of the head and dumped it in an alley behind a store in South Philadelphia. Philip Testa immediately sent word out that Sindone's operation was to be split between his killers, Salvi Testa, Chucky Merlino, and Frank Monte. Sindone's top lieutenant, Joseph Chicky Ciancaglini, was now aligned with Testa and Scarfo and will receive a piece of the action and will oversee what remained of Sindone's crew. Frank Sindone died at the age of 52. Frank Sindone's corpse was dumped behind a South Philadelphia variety store on October 29, 1980. The store was called G.C. Murphy Store at 2001 Oregon Avenue. This store is blocks away from Sindone's house. We will show the footage of G.C. Murphy and newspaper on the death of the Barracuda. Here is the footage of G.C. Murphy of what it is today, which is a grocery outlet store.
Was found in this Testa did not survive this time.
Police don't have a suspect in the shooting, but they did locate what they believe to be
Sindone's murder had all the marks of a mob execution. He was
police
shot.
say.
It began the night of March 21st when Angelo Bruno, a respected and powerful don in La Cosa Nostra, was shot to death in front of his Snyder Avenue row home while sitting in a car driven by John Stanfa. Stanfa has since disappeared. Then, in rapid succession, the grisly murders of Antonio Caponegro, the Bruno family's North Jersey boss, and his brother-in-law, Alfred Salerno. Both bodies were dumped in the Bronx. Last month, John Simone of Yardley, Pennsylvania, a cousin of Bruno, was shot to death and his body dumped in Staten Island. Now Frank Sindone, a lieutenant who had a record of 100 arrests for illegal lottery and gambling. Sindone lived in the 1800 block of Schley Street in the Packer Park section of Philadelphia. He operated this steak and hoagie shop at 10th and Mensing, but authorities say his major occupation was that of enforcer and loan sharking. Sindone's car was found 2 blocks from where his body was found and was taken to police headquarters where it is being combed for possible clues. As to who is responsible for the 5 murders, members of the Pennsylvania Crime Commission could only speculate.
What you've seen happen recently in the way of homicides probably reflects that unsettled situation in the family.
Who's taking over from your viewpoint?
From our viewpoint, Philip Testa.
Law enforcement officials say Philip Testa was Bruno's #1 man, and now Peter Casella has moved up the crime ladder and is Testa's first lieutenant. According to the Pennsylvania Crime Commission, there have been no gangland-style murders in the Bruno crime family for the past 20 years. However, in the past 7 months, there have been 5. The Crime Commission declined to say who might be the next, but added there probably would be others who, like Frank Sindone, would meet similar ends in similar places like this. Hank Berger, Channel 6 Action News, South Philadelphia.
6 days after Bruno's murder, there was a meeting in North Jersey involving John Stanfa, Albert Salerno, John Sindone, John Simone, Phil Testa, and Antonio Caponegro. 6 weeks later, Caponegro and his brother-in-law, Albert Salerno, were found in Brooklyn in the trunk of a car. On September 20th, John Simone was found shot to death in a vacant field on Staten Island. His car was found in Yardley, Bucks County. On October 30th, the body of John Sindone, Angelo Bruno's loan sharking chief, was found in a plastic bag behind a shopping center at 20th and Oregon in South Philadelphia. On February 20th of this year, the grand jury indictments were handed up against Phil Chickenman Testa and 9 other alleged mob members. They were charged with racketeering, loan sharking, mail fraud, and illegal gambling. U.S. Attorney Peter Vira said at the time the indictments would seriously hurt mob activity in Philadelphia. But 10 days ago, law enforcement sources told Action News that other mob families had decided that the indicted men were expendable, and there was a chance they would exchange information if the feds would go easy on them. Therefore, the execution of Testa may have been ordered simply as a practical matter. This is Joe Sanchez, Channel 6 Action News.
Days after Bruno's death, several second-level lieutenants gathered to try to divide up the turf left behind. But it wasn't too long after that when more mob-style hits began taking their toll on the feuding factions. Antonio Caponegro and Albert Salerno were both found dead. Their bodies had been stabbed, shot, and mutilated. Another reputed mobster, John Simone, was shot dead. His car was found in Yardley, Bucks County. A month after that, the body of Frank Sindone, allegedly Bruno's loan sharking chief, was found in South Philadelphia. It was less than a month ago that law enforcement officials got in on the act with a sweeping indictment against Testa and 9 of the remaining alleged mobsters.
It could be, but the victim this time was not well known, which seems to make him an unlikely target of either a mob feud or a power play. It has to be stressed that any speculation that this was a mob killing is just speculation. All the police know for sure at this point is that 32-year-old Pietro Incerelli, father of 2, is dead following an execution-style slaying. John Rollins, Channel 6 Action News in Mount Laurel.
Bruno and Sindone were not just targets in the mob, but they were dead before the indictments were handed up. The case was based on the FBI investigation called Operation Gangplank and was one of the first bills on racketeering, influence, and corrupt organization known as the RICO Laws Act by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Philadelphia. Frank Sindone's funeral service will be taking place at Holy Spirit Church. His funeral would take place in the week of November 1980, specifically November 4th, 1980. Among the attendees will be the real Frank the Irishman Sheeran, whom we mentioned earlier, famously being depicted in the Irishman movie. Sindone's bronze casket will be taken into Fernwood Cemetery and Mausoleum in Fernwood, Pennsylvania, near the Holy Cross Cemetery, which is the resting place of Angelo Bruno, the Testa family, Frank Monte, and more. Frank Sindone will be placed in a mausoleum which you are about to see. His youngest sibling, Jean Sindone, died on February 5, 1989. She will be interred in the crypt below her brother, as you will see in this video. Here is the crypt of the Sindone family. Here is the resting place of Frank the Barracuda Sindone. He was a bachelor, and he was never married nor have any children. All his siblings have passed away. The last sibling, Rita Sindone Sandifer, passed away in 2016. He has other relatives that are not associated with La Cosa Nostra or the Mafia itself. This concludes the story of Frank the Barracuda Sindone. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out more of our content. Feel free to give your feedback and suggestions on who we should do next in the comments. This is Infinitely Productions. We love ya!